Ora. Welcome to Book Lovers Corner for October 2021, our 10th broadcast for this year. We broadcast every fourth Tuesday of the month, 3:30 to 4:30, and we can be listened to on Arrow FM Live and on you can download it onto your podcast by podcast, and also view us on Wairarapa TV Freeview Channel 41 and on YouTube. So you can access us in a variety of different ways. At the moment today we have the usual team: myself, Valda Kirkwood, Steve from Elmo's.
Hello, Valda.
Gareth Rapson from Greytown.
Valda.
And we are supported in this endeavour every month by Steve and Elmo's, the great independent bookshop that we have in Carterton. And every month we also get a notes from the Far Isle from Steve's sister Sue, who used to be part of this team and who's now up on Waiheke Island, and she sends us what she has been reading. She is very desperate at the moment for books because she hasn't seen a library for several months now. She's
nearly 3, I guess.
3 months, I think, and no sign of that actually happening in the near future. So
maybe by Christmas.
So she really is a very desperate woman for books. And I've actually thought I must go through and send her up a parcel. And I think she, when I was talking to her last week, she did sort of suggest that Steve Lawrence, her brother of Elmo's, might also be a bit more generous with book parcels. But we do have Steve's notes, Sue's notes coming up later. But today we're going to start with Gareth and his books of interest for the last months.
Right, and I'm going to start with a nice slim one right from the beginning, which is Zadie Smith's Intimations. And Steve, 97 pages? How do you go on selling these little slim books again? It's $10.95, I notice.
Yeah, it can't be much more. We've actually got a range of little books by all sorts of somewhat interesting people for $9.99, 50, 60, 70 pages.
No, that's good.
You don't get $37.99 for them.
Zadie Smith, she wrote White Teeth.
She's written a whole bunch of stuff.
Yes,
a whole bunch of stuff. And then there was like Autumn and some Spring. Was that her?
No.
That's Ellie Smith.
Ellie Smith,
okay,
and it's very easy to get them mixed up.
Yeah, no, I won't.
What was it, Southwest, I think she did?
Yeah. Anyway, there's sort of like lockdown thoughts on, living in New York, where she's a sort of professor of creative writing, and 6 little short essays. And I thought, I've always wanted to read something from her, so I thought this will be the place to start. And she's a sharp observer, clever woman, and I'd be, enough now that in the future I'd probably pick one of her books up with confidence, knowing that she can work the scene. Now, secondly, that's Intimations. Next one is The Echo Chamber. Do we want to actually talk to Veronica about the cameras being voice activated?
That's what I was
wondering. And but anyway, while that little technical thing. Also, are we on the third mic here, not the fourth?
Yes, we are on the third mic, yes.
Right, next book, John Boyne. Now, we've sort of like Boy in the striped pyjamas, the young adults.
Well, we like John Boyne at Elmo's because every time he writes something, it's different. I mean, here's the Boy in striped pyjamas.
Oh, that's good.
Which are young adult books about concentration camps. But then he's written The Rough Riders. It's kind of a western about Teddy Roosevelt. Just a whole raft of completely different stuff. Everything's different.
And this is different. And as my first exposure to this guy, I was really impressed. This is it's a book about social media, as you can see from the cover. It's well, actually you can't see it from the cover, but the cover has got a phone on the turtle. But and it's 5 days in the life of a family. Think of a sort of Michael Parkinson sort of character, big in the BBC, absolute legend. Everybody knows him. He's and he's got his wife's a novelist, and then the 3 children. One's a lost soul, and but he's become a school teacher, and the next one is Elizabeth is an influencer, which I now know heaps about, and then Achilles is that schoolboy, but he's a con artist, and so these 5 days are just going to progress while what we're going to do. Catastrophe is awaiting all of them, and we get an elaborate rebuttal from John Boyne on the council culture. And the overly woke nonsense that swirls around people. And each sort of chapter knocks off Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok. And so as these characters are caught up in it, very, very funny. I totally give this if you really want to be entertained and find yourself smiling a lot, that's the book for you. Now, moving on.
And I think before we move on, I'd like to apologise to viewers who just find the camera focused on me, but I can assure you that there's an interesting selection of books being portrayed on the other side of the table.
Right.
So thanks, Gareth.
Well, we're working hard to show them to you. And next one is Blacktop Wasteland is what you're seeing here, which is the first breakout book by S.A. Cosby, a black writer, and the book I'm going to review actually is the second book called Razor Blade Tears, which has a great setup where we've got these 2 characters, Ike and Buddy Lee, one black, one white, who meet at the funeral of their sons, who have been gunned down, and their sons were gay and had married, which they knew about, never went to the wedding, and for some reason have been killed. And they meet, and suddenly there's vengeance on the mind. These 2 characters have been in jail for bad things back in the day, but they have totally failed their sons. They just never understood them. They never understood the race thing is a huge divide.
So is there a black and a white partner in that relationship, or the?
No, they're young. Yeah, they were too. They were black and white, and they'd fallen in love. There we go. And so now we get this great tale. They're confronting their prejudices as they now seek vengeance. And if you think of sort of like, I had no note here, like Samuel L. Jackson and Matthew McConaughey type of figures, really dark backgrounds who are coming together to wreak havoc on the people who have killed their sons. And
that's Pulp Fiction as well.
Yeah, well, and this one here, which is absolutely reviewed off the charts, and I have not read, but it has a bookmark that my dear wife has actually managed to grab the book and is reading it now in front of me. So I will talk about that in the future. But he's my new guy. I think he is terrific.
But it sounds like this would be the making of a movie too, does it? Is it?
I think the guy is a writer from the South. Is absolutely jam-packed with Southern colloquialisms. It's kind of like, think of what was that TV show from the trying to think of the one. Anyway, it'll come to mind. It was set in the South. Justified. I don't know if you ever saw Justified as a series. That was deeply embedded in all this. Very, very clever. It is the comments on it, just like on the front of it, by Lee Child, says, sensationally good, new, fresh, real, authentic, twisty with characters and dilemmas that will break your heart. A lot of the writers, Steve Kavanagh, who we've talked about before, goes, every once in a while a writer comes along with an incredible voice. Think Elmore Leonard, Chester Himes, and add S.A. Cosby to that list. So, anyway, he's getting a lot of raps from writers, and he's certainly got my attention. But the main book I want to talk to today is Colson Whitehead's Harlem Shuffle, which is available at Elmo's. I've seen a little stack of it. How's it moving?
No, we're selling some, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, this is a conundrum for America, and in that sense, his first book, The Underground Railroad, won the Pulitzer. Good book, great book. Then they gave one to Nickel Boys, a slim book about abuse in a reform home. So he's won it twice, the Pulitzer. This book is way better than both of them. So
you see another Pulitzer in the running?
Well, whether they can give it. I mean, there's a lot of writers in America.
There are.
And you've got to share the love a bit. So, but this is, I think, by far the best. And I would sort of give it the... it'll probably be rated in my top 10 of the year. It's the story of Ray Carney, and who is he's, as they quote, he was only slightly bent when it came to being crooked, and he's in the furniture business on 121st Street and 5th Street in Harlem by day, but at night he fences sort of stolen goods, and so he's in the Harlem Shuffle, and he's torn by this. He's trying to live the aspirational life, but he is also being compromised. Things aren't going well, and this great story, beautifully recreated 1960s. Now I had a little quote here from The Guardian, and it goes, "Nothing came close to the hot, syncopated fascination of Harlem, with its overcrowded tenements, star-studded theatres, the number runners, ragtime and jazz of the 20s." And this is 40 years later, and it's still the black capital of the world.
So this sounds a bit Chester Himes-ish, doesn't it?
Now, he mentioned in the review here, there it goes, I'm glad you mentioned it. In the 1950s, Chester Himes set a high bar for Harlem noir with his series featuring the black detectives Coffin Ed Johnson, I think it was, and Gravedigger Jones. Now, these really were set the scenes. But Whitehead isn't looking over his shoulder, and this is taking it. This is an interesting book because it's a family saga masquerading as a crime story. So that's one nice thing about it. It's a morality play about the ethics of what is a good life. It's about race and power, and it's a love letter to Harlem. So it's a kind of, I reckon it's great. Loved the writing, loved the pace, loved Ray. I thought the gangsters in it are just great. It is gritty, and it's the classic 3-act tragedy. You're going to love the structure. Jeopardy lingers in the shadows, just always pulling Ray in, and I see a great future for this book. Now, how are we going for time there? Because
Yep, you've got time for one more.
Okay. The other one I'm actually going to talk about, without the book here, called Tinderbox by Megan Dunn. Now, you know...
Yeah, she used to work for the Booksellers Association.
Okay.
And she was a bookseller in London as well, so she understands the sharp end of the trade, as we used to like to say.
Yeah, well, Tinderbox is what... It sort of came into my life. A nice, slim book. She's in the wind at the moment with on the book list, the Unity book lists for her book What I Learnt at Art School. But this is her first one, which is and it was dedicated to book people, especially disenfranchised booksellers.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
And the book was like, it was her trying to write about Fahrenheit 451, and she decided that she would sort of riff on this and she would try and write like 40,000 words in a shorter period of time, and away she went. And it's very, very funny about this. Now, Fahrenheit 451 is what the temperature of what
book's supposed to burn. Yeah,
burst,
that's right.
But she goes, I know what temperature books burn at. Half price. So anyway, the way it goes, she was employed by Borders in London, and they were going down. Her marriage was going down. It is a magnificent take on failure, and in a very entertaining. She was actually an entertaining, fun, clever person.
Nice woman.
Nice woman. Okay,
Not terribly old, mid-30s now, I guess. Maybe.
Yeah, and it kind of gets into the literary culture and how the little things fit into the big picture. So it's sad but funny. I know, it's just like that sort of nice little tragic taste. Can't wait to get my hands on what I learned at art school. She had like the best dumb questions in the bookshop. People would say like, "Who wrote the Diary of Anne Frank?" And another one was like, "Do you have a copy of the original Bible, the one that Jesus would have read?" And so it's full of little booky things like that. But it's also really, really good about her trying to say something original about Fahrenheit 451. Very hard to do on one of the most analysed books out there. Anyway, so that's Tinderbox. So good luck with that if you can find it. And it is available.
I don't think we've got one, but it's still around.
Yeah.
Probably VUP, I think.
VUP, yeah. And my copy came
I should say
from
Victoria University Press.
Yes, and from the Martinborough Library, for those people who are library types. Well worth picking up. It's slim and it's just a great read.
Thank you, Gareth. Some books there I would be very interested in reading, that one. Not so much the others, perhaps, apart from the Echo Chamber. So
I
I've got
think you'd like that.
two on my list. Thank you.
Look forward to hearing your feedback on
Thank
them.
you. Yep. They may well be Christmas reading, given everything that's going on between now and Christmas.
Right.
Steve.
Okay, well, it was suggested to us that we might like to pay some attention to The Road to the Future, which is written by Viv and illustrated by Viv Walker. You know Viv, she's in stalwart of YArt.
She is. And a terrific graphic artist who's able to translate great stories into books. You've had a series of them.
Yeah, we've. Her background, this is the first book she's written.
Right.
She's been an illustrator for several books with Ellie Foster, Elwyn's Dream, Eels of Anzac Bridge, all children's books set in the Wairarapa. And now she's done 2 or 3 with Tanya Connolly, who's a Greytown woman.
No Tanya.
Over the Hill to Greytown. And the one Russian Jack.
That was about the acorn.
Yeah, Samuel Oates and his wheelbarrow.
On the wheelbarrow.
Yeah. So she's been an illustrator, but she was moved to produce this book because one of her antecedents, I'm not exactly sure about how they came down through the generations, was involved in importing electric vehicles, and this was in about 1920.
Yep.
And there was this chap. It's kind of a dramatisation of a true story. So this chap, whose name I'm struggling to remember, imported 100 vehicles. And
it's so topical, isn't it? The idea of
that's what she was
what
thinking
we'll
about.
talk about these days, is the e-cars.
So, and this was her great uncle's, whatever. But he'd actually worked for Thomas Edison in the States.
Oh.
So he knew all about these things. So it's a little story about a race between an electric delivery truck and a petrol-driven electric truck.
How intriguing.
And batteries were an issue back in the day.
Well, yeah, it had a range of 30 miles and then took all night to charge. And it was as heavy as hell.
Have things changed that much?
They've improved a bit.
Yeah. But yeah.
I mean, the strength of it is Viv's illustrating is absolutely terrific, and her ability to lay out a page.
Yeah.
And I'm predicting of all the books, this is the one that actually could find an audience either outside of New Zealand, if it got lucky. But it's going to, should do well throughout. It's the sort of book every primary school, school should have one. Every library, and I think Viv really must have enjoyed not having to collaborate, because I have heard the stories.
Well, I guess there's always a tension.
The tension of the creative, getting the words to match the pictures, and perhaps not being happy with the words all the time, but anyway.
Yeah, and another little plug for Viv. She runs a business called Swirled Books, so she actually helps other people produce books. She's done one on Henley Lake for the Henley Lake Trust.
Yes, I've got that one. Yes, it's
and
lovely book.
We've just got one now she's worked on, which is a book of nude photographs by a local guy. Yeah,
Brian spoke at Wairarapa and spoke very positively about how Viv totally lifted the presentation of the book.
Yeah, and turned something which was going to be far too expensive into something that we could stock.
Wow.
So, she knows what she's doing.
Considerable talent.
Yeah.
And experience.
Yeah. So, this is the road to the future. Where's the hell's it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yep.
So I thought, you guys tell me we talked about this last time, but I thought in the spirit of something that could be children's book, the road to the future is probably sort of 6, 7, 8, really, rather than although it's a picture book, it's not really a preschool one because it's got a lot of text and a lot of photographs and real detail in the back, which makes it interesting. So, so I want to talk about Atua again, apparently, which is Gavin Bishop's book. It's called Maori Gods and Heroes, but it is really the Maori creation story and the Maori gods. So it ranges from I have to be careful how I pronounce this.
Oh, it opens out too, so it's got big...
just amazing, beautiful illustrations.
Yeah. Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah. Papa Tuanuku, who was the Earth Mother. So it runs through the whole gamut of Maori
there was
legend.
something, did I see something about moons or there? That looked interesting.
Of Te Marama, the rhythms of Papa Tuanuku.
I imagine the original artworks, for it in themselves collectibles now. It's pretty stunning.
They will be. Yeah. I mean, it's the text is not exactly disrespectful, but it's a little bit colloquial. I mean, he does talk in here about Maui probably being the first person with ADHD. It's a little bit of a rat bag. And it runs through...
So that would appeal to some of the teenagers who might be reading it.
Well,
to all of us, I think. It puts it in a different way.
But I love the cover. I think that's a very impressive cover.
Well, my view is that every home should have one of these. It's not inexpensive at $40, but it's a wonderful production. And it is just the most accessible route into Maori legend. So I think every home in New Zealand should have a copy of this on a coffee table. Just
Atua, to be bought for Christmas.
Yeah. I think it's great. I didn't realise until I read the little bio at the back that Gavin Bishop is actually Maori. I didn't realise that. So he does have some rights to...
It's the sort of thing you could see... you could see visually being either presented in a program that where they're being able to zoom in and out of the the images, which is so powerful. Whatever it is, it's
a big contribution to where we are as a country, I think.
Well, there you go. Okay.
And one that's accessible to a variety of ages, because kids, even if they don't need to read the words, the visual nature of it means that they can get a lot from it as well.
It's everything. It's a good read-to book for little kids. A couple of things I was going to say before we started, but I sometimes lose where I'm up to. People have said this to me a lot.
Well, I didn't give you the opportunity, actually, was the case, because we went straight into Gareth.
No, that's right. I should say we've had a change of staff at Elmo Books, and that Madeline Slavic, who a lot of people would know, has gone to... she's currently in Hong Kong, actually, in quarantine. So Madeline has gone home to spend Christmas with her folks, who are getting on a bit. She's been a bit worried about them. She's wanted to go back to the States for over a year, but hasn't been able to get a space in quarantine to come back. And she still hasn't.
So she may be away for some time to come.
Yeah,
She'll be much missed.
Well, yeah, certainly by me.
Yeah.
And because I'm obsessive tidier upper, and I, as you know, am not. So
You mean she can find books?
no, she bloody loses them. She's got a different way of organising a bookshop than I have. Anyway. So after she's reorganised, I can't find anything. But a lot of other strengths.
Bringing that up about the way bookshops are organised, there was something on like one of the shows, 7 Sharp or the Project, about the 2 bookshops
next door to each other. Yeah.
Did you saw that on it?
That was fun.
Yeah,
yes.
One organised in a boxy sort of, and then the other one alphabetical, labelled up, and
they
that
worked
was a good
together.
story.
Right? It was a great story.
Well, Sue and I were a bit like that. I mean, she used to be a librarian. She'd have everything either in alphabetical order or possibly where they'd fit in the Dewey system. I just put things down where I think people might pick them up and buy them.
But you're colour-coded, aren't you? Yeah, that's sort of
yeah, I can find a book if I know what colour it is, yeah.
Fascinating.
So that's where we're up to, and hopefully she'll be back in the new year. Because I think we're looking at some changes in quarantine for people coming in with all the jabs in the world and no COVID.
she'll get back.
Yeah.
But underneath that paper, isn't there a space book?
I'll come to that.
Oh, is that that's sort of you've got?
Gareth, there are other things to come first.
Talking about Y word. So our next Y word is the 7th of November, which will feature Pia Buck, who's a Carterton woman. She writes as Melissa Crosby, and she writes romance, which will be...
Yes, I've not ever heard of her, so I'll be interested to see her.
Did you mention her once before about her sales? Once did you tell us how well she was doing? And
I don't remember if it was long ago than yesterday. My chances of remembering are slim. Yeah. So that's where we're up to with Y word. I don't know if you can see that. It looks a bit shiny, but she's written a number of books, and it'll be just a different take. I mean, last time we had the science educator who writes science fiction, and we try and change things up.
Good.
This is the almost summer reading guide. Will be we've got plenty in store if anybody's interested, but it will be out in the midweek on the 17th of November. So that's lists a number of books, which hopefully we'll have most of by then.
How is the supply chain at the moment?
It's patchy. We got an email just this afternoon from the Penguin random rep saying that the new releases for the beginning of November will be here. Ship might be in Tauranga on the 9th or something. So then they got heaps of. So we've got lots of books, but we may not necessarily be able to get things quite the way we would have liked.
Yeah.
But we'll see how we go.
And I think looking ahead to the December Book Lovers Corner, Gareth and because you may well be working, hopefully not, we'll have a look through that and have a look at the ones that we've enjoyed during the year.
Well, there shouldn't be too many on there that you've enjoyed.
No, that's right. There's more like books that we're looking forward to next year.
Yeah. So the book I wanted to talk about is called The Apollo Murders, which is written by a guy called Chris Hadfield, which is a name you may know because he's a genuine astronaut. People would have come across him when he sang the David Bowie song. I'm not sure what it's called, but Earth Control to Major Tom.
That's right. Yeah.
From the International Space Station, which he was in command of, been on captain for 25 shuttle missions, top Navy test pilot, and he's written 2 or 3 books about the Earth with a space perspective. This is a thriller or a murder mystery set on Apollo 18, which I'm not actually sure ever took place, but it's set in 1973, and it's would have been the last of the Apollo missions if it had actually happened. And the thing about this, although it's a thriller and it's the Russians and there's stuff, so it's about a mission to the moon. The people want to know what the Russians are up to, landing spacecraft on the moon, and there's people are not always who they seem and all that sort of stuff. But the thing that I think's interesting about this is just his absolute technical perspective. I mean, most thrillers these days are sort of psychological thrillers. This is really a technical one. But he can write. I read you the first... I'm quite focused on the first sentences and books, first paragraphs.
So was Charles Dickens.
Well, yeah. Because he knows that if we can get people to read the first sentence...
You're like, give us the first sentence.
So this says, I lost my left eye on a beautiful autumn morning with not a cloud in the sky. And that's about...
Oops.
Yeah. That's about his protagonist flying an F4 Phantom and having a large seagull appear in the cockpit with him. But he took, if you're interested in aeroplanes and space, written from a perspective, I think I told you that I'm not giving too much away. There's a helicopter crash fairly early on in this, and he spends 3 pages before the crash explaining how helicopters fly and what you do and which button you push and what the cyclic is and the this is and that's is. So
the only thing I got to know about helicopter flying is when I watched Richie McCaw on TV. He seems to be a master of it all. But just when I glanced at that copy, it said for people who had enjoyed The Martian, Andy Weir's The Martian,
and you did, didn't you?
Clancy's The Hunt for Red October, which is a nice tech book about subs and stuff like that, will really enjoy it. And I was thinking, actually, those are 2 books I really loved, and so that's got my attention. That's good.
Well, I think it's a blokey book, I think, because... No, I shouldn't say that.
We need more blokey books. I'm really all for blokey books.
We know now there are plenty of women aeronautical engineers who... But, they like to read about aeroplanes.
True. Right. And that is like will that be the cover, or is that just a demo for the bookseller to give you an idea?
Yes, because it hasn't got the name on the front, and yet it really is quite an eye-catching cover.
Yeah. We've actually got this in stock, despite the fact it says 18th of December 21, so this one's turned up 2 months early.
Oh, can we have you on the back? That looked interesting.
Yeah. Three people, 250,000 miles from home, 250,000 miles from help.
Oh, that says a lot.
But it just shows you how cutting edge Elmo's is. That these December books are actually, if you go and it can be do the deal at Elmo's. You can get your hands on an early copy.
Yeah, and place to buy Christmas presents.
Well, yes. So I think it's me.
Yep, that's you. Well, I think it's probably time for a musical break. Yes, that's usually the ones I choose. Yes, I was thought, now do I...
This life
Welcome back to Book Lovers Corner for October with Steve and Gareth and Valda. And we're now going to, each of us are going to take a book that Sue, in her Notes from the Far Isle, has written about. And I think, Steve, you're going to take us away with The Revenant by Michael Punk.
Well, yeah, because Sue, as we noted before, is can't get to the library, so she's relying on, to some extent, the library of Duncan, who's her son. Now, I remember selling the Revenant to Duncan 7 or 8 years ago, I can't remember. Made a hell of a good movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, but it's certainly a well-selling book by Michael Punk. A revenant is one who returns from the dead, and this story follows the real-life exploits of Hugh Glass, a mountain man who, when part of a trapping and hunting party in Missouri in 1823, was attacked by a grizzly, Ursus arctos horribilis, just to show off, she says, and subsequently left for dead by 2 men left to care for him. Despite his wounds and attacks by Arikara Indians, Glass dragged himself hundreds of miles in pursuit of those who had left him and stolen his rifle. He finds them both. One, Fitzgerald, had joined the army and was thus protected. The other, a teenage Jim Bridger, who was left alone by Glass and went on to have a notable career as an explorer and a mountain man. So he was another real person, Jim Bridger. In 1833, Hugh Glass was killed by the Arikara. So
Which wasn't the movie take, was it? Because he saved the daughter of the chief or something, and then they passed him by. And
well, this was later, so this is 10 years later. They might have said, "Oh,
film license." Yeah, they might have forgotten. Yeah.
So that's The Revenant.
Well, I can remember seeing the shorts of the film and decided that wasn't for me. Was it Leonardo DiCaprio playing the Revenant and being mauled by the bear, and I just...
A bit more than that, I think, was the cinematography of the landscape, and comets and the sort of just the atmospheric things we were moving. It was slightly edgy beyond belief, and I thought it was a terrific film, and I can see why, if it was a good book. But anyway, I'm going to move on to The Given Day by Dennis Lehane. Is that how we'd say that? Lehane?
I think so.
Yeah, 2008. Now, I'm familiar with Dennis because I have read Mystic River and Shutter Island and enjoyed them a lot, and I was a fan of The Wire, which is
his best television series ever made.
Was that you, or is that The World?
I think that's in The World, but I'm the only one judging it.
No, well, I've heard of it as one of the best. So
I think somebody has anointed it, and
one of the best acting performances. Got Idris Elba in it as a Baltimore gangster, and of course he's English.
and it was one of those, like, if it's going to be a great series, it's going to be about having more on its mind than just drugs on a tenement block. It's, in fact, it was about multi-layered, that choosing a theme each series about education, sort of the civics of the mayor and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, but so Dennis has got good form, and in this book, The Given Day, we move on another 50 years or so in Boston in the 1919 police strike. Hard to imagine the police striking. In fact, it's hard to imagine anybody striking very much these days in New Zealand, because back in the day there were a lot of strikes, and now it's just
nurses and all sorts.
And also the ferry every holiday time. When you wanted to get a ferry at Christmas across Cook Strait, forget it.
I don't know about police though striking in New Zealand. And anyway,
I don't think they can.
The Given Day tells the story of 2 families, one black and white, who struggle through the racial, criminal, and political unrest of the time. Now, immediately that gives you the nice tensions that will drive a good book along, as well as the influenza pandemic. So Danny Cogland is the policeman, son of one of the most powerful police captains. He joins a special unit to hunt down violent radicals. radicals in the 1919s. It's got a whole new meaning now, but also becomes involved in the union movement. Luther Lawrence, note the spellings.
It's an LAU Lawrence, you see. The much better sort of Lawrence.
Oh, look, this Sue has got way too much spelling and is also trying to make jokes. As a black man forced to leave his family behind in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who comes back to work for the Coghlan family, later becomes a friend to Danny. Real characters are woven into the novel. Doc Trow used to do that too. Babe Ruth, President Coleridge, a young John Hoover going on to be the FBI leader, and action-packed, interest, fact-based, gets a big tick if you want to reach back into the back catalogue of Dennis Lehane. And she makes a little, then picks out that she's obviously going through a little Western moment. And
well, that's what Duncan's got.
Right, and she has a shout out to Larry McMurtry, who died in March this year and wrote the great classic Lonesome Dove, amongst many others. And Cormac McCarthy and Annie Proulx. There are a lot of people on this. She's obviously got a bit of time, Sue. And that leaves, and she's got one more book.
More time than she wants. One last book that she's written about is The Rebel Outlaw, Josie Wales, by Forrest Carter, and it was written in 1972. He also published Gone to Texas, so again keeping up with the theme of westerns. And about the time you mentioned about Hugh Glass from The Revenant, about the time of his death, Hugh Wilson, who's a man whose life formed the basis of Josie Wales' story, was born in Missouri. He was known as as Bushwhacker Bill Wilson, and he waged war on Union soldiers and militants throughout the Ozarks, and the Civil War moved to Texas in 1865. Forrest Carter is the pen name of Asa, ASA, Earl Carter, a segregationist during the 50s in Alabama. The book formed the basis of one of Clint Eastwood's best Western movies prior to The Unforgiven. Do either of you being...
Well, I've just seen both of those several times.
Yeah, right. So I knew you'd be aficionados, unlike myself, who's totally ignorant.
We're lacking a steady diet of great Western movies.
Well, they don't make them anymore.
No.
Well, yes, they do, because as we have had proof on the news with somebody famous killing a cinematographer.
Yeah,
that's a Western.
Talk about great Westerns.
Yeah. Silverado was. I liked that when that came out. That was really good.
Yeah.
But the remakes of like the Magnificent Seven and things like that, they're derivative, and we really a fresh new one.
Well, I'll, if I may, before you two go off down memory lane. Josie Wales was a Missouri farmer who became a wanted man when he fought Union soldiers who had killed his wife and child. Totally understandable to then go after them. Pursued by soldiers, he travels south into Texas, picking up an assortment of companions along the way. An elderly Cherokee, a young Navajo woman, and an old woman and her granddaughter rescued from the Comancheros who traded with the Comanche. They finally settle near a town in Santo Rio where Josie continues to defend his new family against all comers. So that looks, that sounds like a really good movie as well.
It was a good movie.
Yeah, no, it's America defines itself by the Wild West. It's a really good discussion point.
Well, Clint Eastwood said there's only two American art forms: there's jazz and the Western. He's a little biased.
Yeah. No, I remember, so people saying like, the past is defined. America. If you put America on the couch, and you would say, they see the past through the Western. They see the present very much through the crime novel, and they see the future through science fiction and the Apollo murders. And
well, that's the past as well, but
which sums up America. But anyway, look, moving on.
Moving on. So, that's really interesting. I'm actually now going to look at a book. I'm going to mention several books. Daniel Silver's latest one called The Cellist with Gabriel Allon. Val McDermid's latest, 1979. And the one that I have been going to do for several months, and it keeps on being knocked off, The Woman Who Stole Vermeer, The True Story of Rose Dugdale and the Ruxborough House Art Heist by Anthony Amore. And I will start with The Woman Who Stole Vermeer.
Well, we need to get it done. I mean, this
yes,
year,
it's
don't
been
we?
yes, it's kept on being knocked off, unfortunately. Now, this is a rollicking biography of a female art thief, and you learn so much about art. What I hadn't realised is this particular woman, who is Bridget Rose Dugdale, who was born in 1941, is the only woman art thief in globally.
The only one who's got caught.
That's
Well,
right, yeah.
well, okay, the only one that's got caught. They're very unusual, and not only has she done it once, she's done it several times. And she's a truly interesting woman. She grew up as one of the of a wealthy family.
Yep.
And so had, privileged educational opportunities, privilege in all sorts of ways, and grew up learning how to move with the high and mighty of the land.
This is in the UK, London.
UK.
Yeah.
And I think her being came to the fore when she was really her parents insisted that she went to come out, when they did the Deb balls in those days, and they were really, and this was going to be the year that it was her turn to do the Deb ball, was the final year the Queen was going to allow it to that she was going to be presented to the Queen. They were going to cut the Queen out after all that, and Deb balls as they were known. This was the last. And she made a pact with her parents, because she didn't want to go to the Deb ball, with her parents, that if she went to the Deb ball, then she could go to Oxford. And so that was a very powerful argument in those days, because women tended not to go to Oxford or Cambridge in those days.
What days are these days?
Well, that would have been
It's going to be early 50s, isn't it?
I went it would have been early 60s.
Okay.
Because I went
London.
Yeah, and
Yes.
London was swinging.
Yeah.
And so she went to Oxford. Well, she became an extraordinary, she was actually a very, very intelligent, very cluey woman.
But she still got caught.
Well, yes.
She wasn't deported to Australia by any sort of...
No.
I think they'd stopped by then, hadn't they?
So she ended up getting involved with various shady characters who used her. They could see that she was someone to sort of hang around, because of course she had the money. And so she got involved with a guy who was pretty ne'er-do-well, and funded him with Mercedes and fine clothes and so on, while she was actually working at the coalface with the poor in East London. And so there was quite a bit of mismatch between what she thought and how she enabled others to live their lives in her coterie. And so she became very involved with the Irish question. She wanted to get involved there, but at a distance. She was never accepted by the IRA nor those people, but she wanted to get money to provide for them. So she did it sort of at a distance in a way, and to get money she did the art heists. And the first one she did was on her family home when her parents were away. And the family home had a lot of wealth and everything. The telltale, it's about her being caught, the telltale thing was the one room in the house that was not, in fact, entered or anything taken from, where there was...
She didn't take anything out of her own bedroom.
Absolutely. And so, you know, I don't know what that says about her, but then she goes on and does ones like the Rusborough House, which was a very wealthy art collection in Ireland, and steals the Vermeer. But they were eventually found, and she was caught and jailed.
In Ireland, or
in Ireland, and she was a very interesting character.
Well, she was buying guns for the IRA.
She was buying guns, and actually, you know, travelling across the channel, you know, across the strait with them, and
and you're feeling for
I'm intrigued.
Sympathetic or intrigued with?
I'm just intrigued with her, and very, very appreciative of her wherewithal and her courage to do the things that she did in that day and age, and relatively got away with a hell of a lot, relatively. But but it was a sad life. I think there was a lot of deep sadness.
It seemed, just on your retelling, you know, she was manipulated by other agencies or forces or people, and
but she didn't see she was manipulated.
Willingly manipulated, and played a little bit, and it seems a contradiction of
well, she's a complex character.
Yeah,
I think
that's a good,
very
a good
complex
way
character.
to come at it, because it's where does, you know, like the ethical grounding of the person, and why?
But what ethical grounding do you get if you're brought up in the wealth of Britain? You know, if you're brought up in a family where there's wealth and things come easy, and you don't have to think about things because you've got so many givens. And I think that and she in fact had more a core of those sort of mores within herself than she would have got given growing up, I think.
The audience for this book?
I think it's...
Valda.
I think there's a very wide audience for this book. But certainly I know women will be intrigued with the character that she is. But anybody interested in art, anybody interested in history, and particularly that history of the 60s, 70s, 80s, which in Britain was very vibrant. I mean, things were happening. I can remember being on an underground train and stuck in the depths of Baker Street Station because there'd been a bomb alert in Baker Street Station, and it wasn't an easy time to be living there.
Sure.
So I recommend it, and but it's quite a dense book, and it is incredibly well researched. So it is a very thorough book. So I found myself at times just skipping over some of the details because they weren't of interest to me. I was really interested in the thread of the story. So that's the woman who stole Vermeer, the true story of Rose Dugdale and the Rusborough House art heist by Anthony Amore. And, you know, she's now out of jail, but she lives a very secluded sort of life, perhaps understandably too. The other one I'd like to mention is Daniel Silver's latest book, The Cellist, and it's based on Gabriel Allon, Israeli spy, assassin, art restorer. And in this particular one, you've got the Russian dissident who, is found murdered. You've got the trove of documents about financial misdealings, and it actually is less of a mystery, this one, but I found it absolutely intriguing because it's very much a book of today. It mentions COVID in it, because they had to have meetings with people at distance and so on. I think that I learnt about what's going on internationally, what the possibilities of what go on internationally financially, and it's just absolutely mind-blowing.
Are these? Is our protagonist? Are these? Would you read these books in sequence?
No, I think you can. I think it's always better to read them in sequence because you actually see people's relationships and what they do. For example, he ends up at the top of the Israeli Secret Service, running the whole shebang, whereas
back in the day,
he was just an ordinary old
right.
But I don't think
joke.
it matters.
But I don't think it really matters.
It's a bit like reading the Hornblower novels.
Each stands on its own.
Yeah. If you read when he's an admiral first, you know him was a midshipman at some point. So it doesn't matter if you jump back and forth.
True.
Anyway.
I've never. People have spoken so highly, and I have met people who absolutely love him. So
well, I enjoy him.
Yeah.
But one final one, which we must get a move on, is Val McDermott's latest 1979, where she goes back in time to captures her beginnings as a journalist, and it's the first of a series of 5 on Ellie Burns, who's working for a Glasgow tabloid, and she's confronting the sexism, the racism, the homophobia that was all very alive and well in 1979. I just didn't feel I needed to go through all that again, having experienced it myself in that day. So it's not a Val McDermott that I will be continuing to read, unfortunately. And that's always brings us to an end for the day. So if Gareth, you can tell us what you've read quickly, please.
My main book was Colson's Whitehead, the Harlem Shuffle, which you can get at Elmo's. Terrific book. Thriller of the year for me is Mr. Cosby, and we'll talk again about that. And very quickly, John Boyne's latest, and a little touch of Zadie Smith.
And Steve?
Well, I've talked about Viv Walker's electric car book, The Road to the Future, and in keeping with the perhaps more childlike theme, Artur Gavin Bishop's entree really to Maori gods and heroes, and at more depth a little bit about the Apollo murders by Chris Hadfield, who is probably the world's most famous astronaut living.
And
For sure.
I covered The Woman Who Stole Vermeer, True Story of Rose Dugdale and Rossborough House Art Heist by Anthony Amore, Daniel Silver's latest, The Cellist, and Val McDermott's latest, 1979. And with that, I'd like to thank you all very much,
Thank you,
watchers
Valda.
and listeners. Thank you, Gareth. Thank you, Steve. And we look forward to seeing you for our Christmas edition in December.
What about November?
Yeah, what about the...
Oh, I'm skipping a month. We'll see you in November 1st. Okay, thank you very much.